via Illinois.
Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Bill Barr's hot mess, writes Kim Strassel, Wall Street Journal. And I think she sticks the landing yet again. For the first time in this presidency, the Justice Department will have a leader who is apart from the Russia stink, neither accused of collusion nor obsessed with finding it. He's also uniquely suited to understand the importance of credibility and accountability, having worked in the 70s at CIA, then under intense fire, and, of course, Attorney General previously. And Strassel offers a lot of questions that need compelling answers. Is it acceptable for the FBI to use opposition research as an excuse to surveil a political campaign, to use back channels to stay in touch with sources at fire, to open counter-intel investigations into political figures, to actively hide those investigations from congressional overseers, to hold meetings about removing presidents? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, Americans deserve to know that this is the brave new world they live in. Absolutely. And you're getting another taste of it because you have another disgraced former senior official at FBI who's got a book out. And that means the breathless Scott Pelley interview on CNN, which was previewed yesterday. Andy McCabe. Scott Pelley did not mention this. Nobody on the CBS panel discussing the interview did either. Fired for lying.
Yeah, that never came out.
The Inspector General report. Has anybody impugned the integrity or fairness of Michael Horowitz, the DOJ Inspector General, and the report he compiled that led to Mr. McCabe's termination? Just asking because I don't get that sort of context.
And the book is titled, by the way, The Threat, How the FBI Protects America in the Age of Terror and Trump.
Terror and Trump, synonyms.
Yes.
Or compliments at minimum, right? Yeah. That's how we're supposed to take that. Here's McCabe talking Russian collusion.
I was speaking to the man who had just run for the presidency and won the election for the presidency, and who might have done so with the aid of the government of Russia, our most formidable adversary on the world stage. And that was something that troubled me greatly.
How long was it after that you decided to start the obstruction of justice and counterintelligence investigations involving the president?
I think the next day I met with the team investigating the Russia cases, and I asked the team to go back and conduct an assessment to determine where are we with these efforts and what steps do we need to take going forward. I was very concerned that I was able to put the Russia case on absolutely solid ground in an indelible fashion, that were I removed quickly or reassigned or fired, that the case could not be closed or vanish in the night without a trace. I wanted to make sure that our case was on solid ground, and if somebody came in behind me and closed it and tried to walk away from it, they would not be able to do that without creating a record of why they'd made that decision.
Right. Okay. Again, this is Andy McCabe, hero. Andy McCabe, Jack Ryan. And then Scott Pelley goes on to characterize something else McCabe told him that made headlines yesterday, confirming in quotation marks because, again, he's fired for lying.
Right.
Confirming that, yes, there was a movement afoot within justice to move on President Trump.
There was a discussion underway about removing the President of the United States.
They were counting noses. They were not asking cabinet members whether they would vote for or against removing the president, but they were speculating this person would be with us, that person would not be, and they were counting noses in that effort.
And this was not perceived to be a joke.
This was not perceived to be a joke. Mm-hmm. It was also said at a previous time that the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, offered to wear a wire into the White House to record potentially incriminating conversations with the president. A statement was released after that was never serious, it was sarcastic, etc. McCabe, in our interview, says no. It came up more than once, and it was so serious that he took it to the lawyers at the FBI to discuss it.
And soon-to-be former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said, no, what McCabe is saying is, quote, factually incorrect, unquote. And Rosenstein mentioned in his statement what Scott Pelley didn't about McCabe, that he was fired for lying to the DOJ IG. You know, who to believe? Comey and McCabe are offered conflicting testimony before Congress. Rosenstein and McCabe are offering conflicting views on this counter intel, fifth column action inside justice against President Trump. Who to believe, if any of them? For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by David Harsanyi, senior editor at thefederalist.com, author of the book First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun, From the Revolution to Today. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So what about the latest, greatest former FBI guy who becomes a media star for at least a week, Andy McCabe?
I laugh out loud every time I hear him or read that he said that he set this all up so that it wouldn't just vanish into the wind. The Russian investigation was just going to vanish into the wind without his hard work. Whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, the idea that a bunch of law enforcement officials, who are essentially his subordinates in a way, can basically try to set him up to overthrow the elected president. It's just, to me, this is huge, and it's never going to be treated as the big story it is because we're busy talking about whatever new theory has come up about Trump conspiring with the Russians to win the election.
Yeah. Well, when McCabe spoke, to me, it felt like he was acting like a victim. Did he come across the same way to you?
Yeah, I mean, he basically has a sort of Comey-like, story to tell. A man just doing what's best for the nation. So he's acting like a victim. He's a lie. I don't even know what to say about this anymore. It's kind of like if we started this story from scratch, but told you first what these FBI people had done, and just with counterintelligence, and how the whole thing was triggered through Oppo research done by a Democratic president, paid for by a Democratic presidential candidate that was partly derived from Kremlin sources. You would say this was a coup. I hate to use that word. It's not a violent coup, but it sounds like a coup to me.
Speaking of matters of constitutional import, the president, 9 a.m. this morning, expected to declare a national emergency, invoke his powers under the 1976 National Emergencies Act to gather together additional resources that are being provided by Congress in the compromise deal to do more border security funding and wall building, ostensibly. What do you think about the argument that is being made by some conservatives that this is a dangerous precedent the president is setting?
Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous precedent. It's Obama-esque in scope, I guess, and it's essentially going around the will of Congress. Congress just pursued a budget bill that gave him some money for the wall. They obviously don't want to give him all the money for the wall. I disagree with them. But if we're just going to find loopholes and ways to do whatever we want when we're president, that to me is executive abuse. Even if he gets away with it, even if it's legal, Obama did many things through these sorts of loopholes in different ways, including DACA and many, many other things that were, in my estimation, executive abuse. And Trump needs to just find a different way and win more seats and get his wall that way. I just think this sets up a terrible precedent. And listen, Democrats might do it anyway in the future. The only silver lining might be that the court finds the 1976 law, somehow unconstitutional, and then that would be, I think, a great thing because this is really a congressional problem. They've been handing over their duties to the executive branch for decades already, and I think that's a big problem. And
so, I mean, specifically, since you've written a book about America's enduring history with the gun, Pelosi invoking essentially gun control as a national emergency issue, and that the president is opening the door to this. And my point, as you sort of intimated, is, I mean, seriously, with the Democrats, how the Democrat socialists are constituted these days with their presidential candidates, you think that they wouldn't go after guns or anything else within their left-wing agenda, regardless of what the president does or doesn't do on national emergencies as it pertains to the border?
I do, but there are two things there. I think you're making a case to the American people that it's wrong, and so that they might not do it because of political pressure. But if you're yourself doing it, then that political pressure is going to be difficult to put on them because you yourself have done things like that. Secondly, I don't think that guns are actually anything. This is about funding and moving around money. I'm not sure. And guns are protected by the Second Amendment, obviously. I don't think that, I think she's just throwing that out there as sort of scaremongering. But when you're talking about things like, the Green New Deal and funding certain sorts of things that might happen. And I think they would do it anyway. I think they have done things like this. They were funding Obamacare subsidies without any congressional funding mechanism. So it's not like they won't do this if they will. But I think it's going to be harder and harder to make the case that they're abusing power if you yourself are doing the same thing.
Well, do you know the statistics of all the people that come here illegally, who commit crimes, who commit homicides, who commit rapes, and you really don't think there's any need for a national emergency to get funding for his wall?
I think that Congress should be working on legislation to build a wall. So I agree with you that there is an emergency there. The national emergency has never, that I have looked through them, never been used to circumvent what Congress is doing. Just because there's a problem doesn't always mean it's an emergency. I mean, using that example, liberals can easily say climate change is a huge emergency and do whatever they like when it comes to funding. I just think it's just not how the American government's supposed to work. I'm not saying, I think Trump actually has a better sort of, in a broader sense, I think Trump's case is wrong. I think it's overreach, executive overreach. I mean, but he probably has a better case that the border is a much more significant national emergency than climate change and things like that. But the problem is, I'm not sure Americans are going to agree with that in the long run.
Now, the flip side of this, and we were just talking to Mark Morgan at the top of the hour, Obama's former Customs and Border Protection chief, and he suggests the president should veto the legislation that was sent to him. Some others are suggesting that too, because there are those landmines in there that the president expressed concerns about finding when it comes to sort of new amnesties and the inability of ICE to do, putting handcuffs on ICE effectively to do its job. So some real concerns there that it actually could exacerbate the problems, particularly for law enforcement. What's your view on the deal that is in place, the legislative deal in place?
I think they just tried to find something, some middle ground that allowed the president to say he was moving forward and allowed, Democrats to say they had won. I don't think it seems like a good deal to me. I'm not an expert on it. I wish the president would veto it or would not have supported it and continued moving forward. I mean, I think that the shutdown did not work out for him, obviously. He doesn't have a lot of leverage. But I'm not sure that simply because a poll says that the president, the people blame the Republican, which is always the case during a shutdown, doesn't mean that it's good for Democrats either. I forgot what the number was, at $1.3 billion for the wall or something.
Yeah,
right. That's a joke. So he should have stuck to his guns, I think. I mean, it is ridiculous that Democrats who want to spend trillions of dollars, $1 bazillion on Green New Deals won't, cough up a few, $1 billion for a wall. It's kind of ridiculous, and I think he should just continue that fight instead of doing this. And by the way, there might be even other ways he can move forward on this incrementally rather than a national emergency.
Yeah, some discussion about working with friendly state administrations like Abbott in Texas and do a bit of a federalist play rather than the national emergency play.
And another component to this is some judge in Hawaii or somewhere else is going to step in anyway, and then it's just going to be caught up in the courts and make it even more difficult to move forward, I think.
He is David Harsanyi, senior editor at Federalist.com. The book, First Freedom, A Ride Through America's Enduring History with the Gun from the Revolution to Today. David, thank